This is Uduak Afangide of Afangide Therapy, and it is 2:30 on Friday afternoon, and we are having conversations with mothers and daughters. So I am excited that you're here. I'm excited that you choose to spend your afternoon with us because we have amazing guests today. I do want to say that last week was our very first episode, and you got to meet me and my daughter Salem and the conversations we had. And today you get to meet my friend Carla and her three beautiful daughters, Rebecca, Tabitha, and Hannah. And just like we did last time, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Maybe let Carla start first, and then let the ladies introduce themselves, her daughters. And then we'll just dive right into the conversations. But I do want to say the reason for these conversations is because I believe in the power of stories. And I believe that if we're not sharing our stories with each other, we tend to feel like everything I'm going through, I'm just the only one going through it. And so I want us to share these stories. I want us to have these conversations. I want those of us who are raising daughters who are maybe different from who we are to know we're not alone and that there is hope at the end of the tunnel. And I want those of us who are raising daughters that are just like us and maybe have great relationships to also know that there are others who want to hear what we're doing and what's going on with us. So if you're here, go ahead and say hi. Go ahead and leave your comments on there so we'll know who all is here. But thank you so much, Carla and the Lewises for joining me today. So Carla, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, so my name is Carla, and I have been fortunate to be the mother of three girls. And I will be honest that I was praying for girls. I grew up with just one brother who was the youngest. And so my prayer was, Lord, I don't know how to raise a son, but give me daughters when I decided to have children. And so I was fortunate. I was able to have three daughters. I am married to Zachary Lewis, and we've been married for over 30 years. Can't remember exactly how many.
31, 32 years this year.
Okay, 32. Thank you. 32 years this year, and so yes, I'll pass the baton to my firstborn.
I'm Rebecca. I'm her firstborn daughter, so I was the first for a blessing of 4 years. Okay. So I was very fortunate I am also a mother to a daughter as well. And so I'm glad to be a part of this conversation.
How old is your daughter, Rebecca? How old is Elisa?
She is 7 years old.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Okay, great. Tabitha?
Yes, my name is Tabitha. I'm the middle child. No, I don't suffer from middle child syndrome.
Just go ahead and put it out there before we ask, right?
I read articles about it, and I'm like, this does not describe my life. So I don't know who created that, but yeah, I know it's true for some people, but not for me. I live in Boston, Massachusetts, and yeah.
Yay! Okay, and Hannah.
Hi everyone, my name is Hannah, and as you can see, I'm the youngest, the baby of the two of my siblings. And I guess I kind of probably fit the mold of being spoiled, as my siblings will say that I'm the most favorite, but I don't think I am. But hey, if you are the youngest child, you know.
They feel your pain, right? Oh, okay. Well, I'm so glad. I want to be respectful of your time, respectful of the time of everyone that's out there that's joining us. I'm glad that y'all could join us. But I want to go ahead and maybe just begin, because one of the things we said last week was when you have a daughter, and especially when Carla said I was praying for daughters, I was like, Lord, I don't know how to raise boys. I want daughters, and God answered her prayers. But what tends to happen is you have a daughter and you feel like you have so much in common with them because she's a girl, you're a girl, you know everything about being a girl. Mm-hmm. And so I want to hear a little bit, what are some of the differences and similarities between you ladies and your mom? In what ways are you similar to Carla, and in what ways are you different?
I can tell you how I'm different from my mother. I know I am a touchy-feely type of person, and my mother she's not a snuggler. My child likes to snuggle too. She's not a snuggler. She doesn't want to be held. She really doesn't like to be touched. She doesn't want you to be up under her. She likes her space. So we are very different on those things.
Okay. Okay, and so what so I want you to be thinking because I want to hear how those differences played out in your relationship with your mom. Okay, but I'm gonna let Tabitha share a little bit too about differences and similarities.
I would say that like I'm definitely a comedian in a different life, and I feel like me and my mom share our like liking to like love making people laugh. So I feel like
Hmm.
that's definitely a similarity for us. Um, so yeah, I think it's a similarity.
Okay, okay. Any differences that stood out?
Yeah, I think I think differences. My mom is very much in the last couple of years. She's become very open about things, and sometimes she's overshares, in my opinion. So I think I'm more of a private person, and people for certain people. My
Hmm.
mom can meet anybody on the street and she'll say she has a depends on. So it's just that's just what I mean. I'm not saying stuff like that, you know.
Uh-huh.
So she just
Uh-huh.
she loves to share.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so I can see you as a teenage girl cringing because you
Yes.
know she's gonna start talking and sharing everything, right?
Yes. You're just like, oh gosh.
Okay, how about you, Hannah?
I guess with similarities, I feel like what Rebecca was saying, I'm not touchy feely. I like my space. And so I feel like I get that kind of from my mom of not being really touchy feely. I like, having my space and different things like that. And then with similarities, I feel like Adam and I smile a lot like my mom. And I feel like I really like getting to know people as she's like starting to develop more relationships now, with just like friendships. So those are kind of like the similarities of different things.
Were there any differences that you observed that really stood out between you and your mom?
Differences. I'm trying to think of one. I'm sure there is some. I'm trying to
Okay.
think of a big difference, but
Okay, but
maybe, I don't know. I guess some of Tabitha, she kind of overshares. I guess I'm more an
private.
overshare. I'm more private. I'll share things with certain people, but like she said,
Mhm.
my mom will overly share and
Yeah,
be
okay.
honest.
So are there any examples that anybody can think of where the differences between you and your mom was a sort of tension or stress in your relationship with her?
Well, I think when Rebecca mentioned about me not being affectionate, and that is something that was so true because growing up, that is not something that was done. And I realized that that was something that I lacked,
Mm-hmm.
and that was something that she needed, and I didn't give that. But one of the things, as I tell them, hashtag growth, I've tried to change it a little bit with my granddaughter and be a little bit more touchy feely, but it wasn't something that was natural for me. It wasn't instinctive. And I still remember years ago putting them in an environment where they could see loving, touching things,
Mm-hmm.
because I knew that that area was not my strength. And
Mm-hmm.
fortunately for me, they found women in their lives, because that's one of the things I prayed for. I said, God, I want you to give them other women in their lives to fill the gaps, because I don't think I could fill every gap. And so, especially for my daughter Rebecca, there was this wonderful woman, Mrs. Hughes, who was like that second mom to her. And she found other women as well too. But Mrs. Hughes passed away years ago, and that was such a loss for her and for me, but especially for Rebecca. But that, I believe, filled a big void in her life when it came to that.
Okay. Okay.
To answer your question about like something that created a wedge with things that my mom is like very like struggles with, um, is like there was a time I got really, 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 really sick. And my mother, you know, they knew I was sick, but I was in Boston, so they couldn't really tell like how sick I got. My mom came to move my sister up here because this is when Hannah was moving up here, and she saw me like at this very sickly, you know, borderline needed to be hospitalized. I ended up being hospitalized.
Mm.
And she left. And I was very hurt about her coming, seeing me in that state and not extending her trip and not, you know, being like that affectionate person that Becca's talking about. Because yeah, I can't say that that's something that stuck out as a difference, but it stuck out as something that I wanted. I wanted her to be there. I wanted her to say, "Oh my goodness, my daughter's so sick. She can't do this for herself. She needs my help. Let me stay." You know, this whole, I'm putting motherly in quotation marks because I don't want people to believe that you have to do these certain things
to be motherly.
kind of, it's not true. My mother is very motherly in her own right. There were certain traits that I wanted, especially in that season, that she wasn't able to give because, and I can't even deny the fact that that's been my mother since the inception, right? But it was in that moment, it's like, but this is a time where I need it. And so it did create a wedge to the point where I was in the hospital and she did not know. I was in there for multiple days, and I didn't even want to tell my older sister Rebecca because I knew Rebecca would tell my mom. But somehow, so that was something, that difference, or in
her personality and the way she is creating tension in your relationship with her.
Right.
And I think that's important to mention, because a lot of times what seems to cause systemic tension that just goes on and on and on, is not just the realization that we're different, but the actions that follow because we're different, you know? And so I guess my question following up from that would be, that happened. How did you guys navigate that so that now you have the kind of relationship that you have?
Right. So I think what was helpful is the fact that I'm not as open as my mom, but me and my mother, we talk a lot. So she felt me disappear.
Right. Distancing.
She felt me distancing. She knew that I wasn't calling. She knew that I wasn't sharing. She knew. And though I missed my mom, I needed to mourn and really know what was frustrating me, what really was and know how to share it with her. And know that me sharing with her is not necessarily for her to say sorry.
Right.
No, this is how I feel, and not expecting a certain response, right? So the value that I had in the relationship with her, it took time. It took a couple weeks. And then I ultimately made that call, and I said, this is when you did this hurt me because of X, Y, and Z. And so, as most people know, my mother's a relationship coach, a life coach, and she often is the coach when it's not the time. This is not a coaching situation. I'm not a client. And so I had to let her know, you're going to hear me. You're just going to hear me, and I don't want you to have some intuitive, oh, well, because my mom likes to think that, oh, because I was so hands off, look at how good you guys came off. You didn't need me to help you with homework. You didn't need all these things. And it's just like, okay, yeah, we turned out fine, but it would have been nice to have those things, So, I think that I shared it with her, but like I said, I'm glad you asked that question. I don't know how it would have been a lot different if we didn't have that strong
connection
in the beginning. And so I understand, and it was hard for me, even with that strong relationship, coming to her and just getting over this. Okay, this person that I care about and I know loves me hurt me, and I need to let them know so that we can move forward. And it didn't go back. The next day we weren't talking like we usually do. I let it sit. I let it marinate. I let her.
No, right. And so it sounds to me like the going back to the kind of relationship you had before the incident was organic and happened slowly over time. But you guys already had deposited so much into the emotional bank account that it was easy to go back to a good space.
Right.
One of the things too, though, I want to throw out there, as my girls have gotten older, they know that with me and my siblings, we have had strained relationships because we couldn't be honest with each other. So one of the things I wanted to have with my girls as they became adults is to have that kind of open conversation, even though we know that sometimes certain things we say may not be what we want to hear. But another thing that I used to tell Tabitha is, tell me how you want me to appear, because I am not that typical mom. So I'm like, just even for her graduation, I said, let me know if you need me to bring flowers. Let me know if you need me to cry. Let me know what you need me to do, because I don't know what the expectation is. But if you tell me, I will give you that. But
Mhm.
going back to the wonderful illustration that Tabitha made, because we have an open conversation, when I saw her ill, one of the things I asked her is she was doing what her doctor had said to do. And she wasn't being compliant. And so, one of the things in our conversations we were having, I knew how her relying on me to solve something would be more detrimental. And one of the things I wanted to give my children as they got older, and it would seem as though I didn't care, were tools that will help them navigate life. Because so often I perceived that I was crippled by my mom by being there too much. And so you just didn't know how to function when they weren't around. And I
Mhm.
felt that was a disservice. So it could have been because I thought of things like that, I may have been too hands off with my girls
Mhm.
with certain
Mhm.
things, because I was just like, I need you to become compliant. Because, right, my oldest daughter didn't tell me that she was in the hospital. I happened to pass by and saw them FaceTiming, and I saw her, and I'm like, "Are you in the hospital?" And they hung up real quickly, and I just let it go because I knew, I trusted. One of the things I prayed for my girls, I trusted that whatever process they have to go through, it may be uncomfortable, but in the end, they will be stronger for it. So I know Tabitha is like, that's not what she wanted right now. She needed me to be right there, but I think I would have done more damage than
You know,
good.
well, and see, what one of the things that we're seeing as we have conversations with mothers and daughters is that we mothers, we have our own perceptions, and our daughters have a different reality. And so the tension, and what I love that you ladies are doing is that you're talking about it.
Mhm,
And even though it's easy to try to justify what I did, a lot of times it makes my daughter feel like she's not heard.
mhm,
What you do is, with what you're doing, when she says, and your daughters know you so well, Carla. So, and they've built a safe space, or you've built a safe space for them so that they can say, Mama, I don't need a coach right now. I just need you to listen.
right.
And so we learned that as we're mother, because I go to my daughter and I'm learning to say, what do you need right now? Because
Mhm,
a lot of times the mother part of me wants to come out and fix and wants to come out and the counselor wants to come out and tell her, well, how does that make you feel right? She's like, Mama, I don't need a counselor. I'm just looking at my mama right now.
Right.
So
Yeah.
sometimes she'll be like, just hold me. And I'll hold, and everything within me, I'll be hush, don't say anything. Don't
Yeah.
say anything.
Yeah.
Just. So I think, and I love that Kim said that. That's good, Carla. It's okay to ask questions. Being able as mothers to say, because when we're so different, and so being able to say, what do you need right now? What do you
mhm,
need? And then just be quiet and listen. I love that.
mhm.
I love that. But you said something, Carla, that I wanna follow up on too. You talked about I didn't grow up that way, so I wanted something different. And the difference was that, like you and I are similar in this way. We grew up in a different culture, and we were mothered differently in that culture. So I want you to speak a little bit about bringing that part of your culture into an American culture and raising kids that are multicultural.
Well, because yes, I grew up in St. Croix, Virgin Islands, but I also spent 3 years in Puerto Rico, Mayagüez, Puerto Rico. So hablo español. And one of the things I loved with that culture, they were very affectionate. So it really was jarring to my system when I moved from St. Croix to Puerto Rico and saw all these people who were just so loving, touchy, and like that. And that was not my norm. And then when I moved back to St. Croix from that environment, going back into a very sterile, not affectionate environment, I knew what it looked like. Even though I didn't have it in my home or in the culture there, I saw it and I love that. So even me, I just love Hispanic culture. I don't know if that's or so that is what I wanted for my girls. I knew I wanted them to be able to be affectionate and loving in that tangible way. I always liked when I would see the French people kiss on both sides. But again, in our culture, we didn't do that kind of a stuff. So you learn to take those different things that you see that you may not be able to incorporate, but hopefully for the next generation, they build on it. And that's what my daughter Rebecca has done for her daughter. A very affectionate child, very loving. And so I applaud my daughter for making a decision and moving it in that direction to make sure that her daughter has that I was not able to give her growing up.
How about being raised? Did you ladies feel as if being multicultural or bicultural affected the way you were mothered in any way?
Yeah, I mean, it's just different. So, I mean, when you hear about different things or different things that you take on, so as a mother myself, different things that you take on and you use in parenting, certain aspects, people judge you or look at how you parent and are like, that's strange. Or some people may use the word, like I hear nowadays, is they use the word granola E. So I'm just kind of like, okay. But different things that I've taken from my mother and that's different than what's the norm to where I living in Alabama.
Okay, so thank you, Kim. Kim is like so true. My ignorance is going to show. So explain granola E for me.
Well, from what I've learned living here is certain people use the term granola or they call them crunching moms. As I feel like my mom was a more naturalistic, holistic type of mother. So in certain aspects of things, she would have somewhat of tough love or things like that. Like if you felt ill when we were younger, it's like, well, here's some salt water or here's some charcoal or you know what, let's get some echinacea or let me get some of my. She was doing essential oils before they were a thing. So they're a big thing now. So my mom had her essential oils. So like, let's see what we can put on this or what we can do. And those are things that she learned. So from what I've learned nowadays, they use the term granola or crunchy. But my mother was doing a lot of those things before they were even a thing. And that was just her norm. Like she breastfed us and she breastfed us for a very long time in the sense for American wise. So like 2 to 3 years. So that was something that's different. And many people gave her a lot of flack in regards to that. So there was different things that we took that I feel like helped us because I feel like we look at the world somewhat different just because of the multicultural. So we see things from many different aspects, having a multicultural background.
Okay, I like that. Vonda said, could there be a happy medium? And I think that's what we're talking about, right? That medium of being true to who I am because of my culture and also being aware of what my child needs or what my children need and being able to tailor that for each child.
Because I want to touch on that just briefly, because especially when we moved to St. Croix, I wanted my girls to experience St. Croix and be there. And I remember when we moved there again, I was still making sure I work on what I want for my girls. And I actually had them at 3 different schools because they had needs. Each of them had a different need. And people were like, why you're doing that? You should put them all in one school. You're the parent. When I would say, well, no, this one doesn't like this school. Because again, it was a culture shock when they moved to St. Croix because it was very abrasive, abrupt. The schooling, they still do the spankings and the schoolings there and, just different things. And I could see that my girls were struggling. And I was just like, no, I need learning to be fun. Let me find what this is going to look like for each one of them. And so they went to different schools. And so we drove them to different schools and people were like, oh, you're spoiling them. But I'm like, I am tired of assuming that one shoe fits all for parenting. And I knew I was making mistakes, but the things that I could have control over and change, I was.
Oh, I think that was good. At what ages were you ladies?
I was in the 6th grade because I was in the 6th grade and I think Tabitha's about 4 years younger than me.
I was in the 1st grade.
So Hannah was in 1st grade. So Tyler, what grade were you in?
I was in 3rd grade. 3rd grade.
Third.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. And I think that's that medium that I think Vonda Kay was talking about. Yeah. That idea of being able to look at each child and see what do they need at this time
Mhm.
And I think that was important when I was thinking about having you all on the episode today, because I have only one daughter. And so the challenge for me, raising one daughter looks different, I would imagine, than raising three different daughters. And so I want you to talk about how the differences in their personalities affected the way you mothered them. I think you talked about that a little bit when you talked about the school, the school being different for them. But apart from in that specific situation, are there other ways that their personalities and their own differences, the little ways that they differ from each other, has affected how you mothered them?
Well, yes, because especially for, one of the things that made it challenging too is my husband had a chronic illness or has a chronic illness. And so one of the things that played into that was when he would have an episode. I remember early on, I think Rebecca was maybe 2.5, and I was feeling overwhelmed with that. And I remember sending her home to my parents to St. Croix, but I realized that caused a lot of harm. That caused a lot of detachment because I was breastfeeding. But here I was, a young mom feeling overwhelmed with an ill husband. And so therefore, thinking I'm helping, but really harming. And I think that really created a chasm in our bonding, especially when I sent her home. So I told her, if I had to do that over again, I would never make that choice again, because sometimes we think we're helping our children when they're young. That is really, it's important for that bonding time with parents. But when it goes to, because I forgot the question that quickly.
The question was, what were the differences? How did the differences in their personalities and the differences that, mothering three different girls with three different personalities?
So when it came to the different personalities, I just wanted each one of them to be them. And so for the personalities, one of the things growing up for me, I didn't have a choice when it came to certain activities I could do at church. It was this like, you had to do them. You had to do certain things for church school. You had to do them. It was no choice. And one of the things I did differently for my children, I gave them a choice. I didn't say you had to do this. You had to participate in this church activity. You had to do X, Y, and Z. And again, others looking on didn't agree with that, but I felt that each one of them knew what their interests lay. And if it wasn't in a particular activity there, that me forcing them to do it would make any sense. So I think that is, so each of them got a choice to say what extracurriculum activity they were interested in doing, what church event they wanted to attend. And I gave them that choice.
Because I think it's easy to say one shoe fits all. This is my theory on parenting, and that theory on parenting is what's going to fit each of my children. And I'm hearing you didn't do that.
No.
Anybody want to speak to that before I ask another question?
Well, I know she did do that because I took dance and my sisters both took karate. So, and she would have to take us to do different places in order for us to do those activities. Just like with the schools, we all three went to different schools. And it didn't even seem like people thought it was an inconvenience. To us, it wasn't an inconvenience. You knew what order you got dropped off in, and we would sit how we needed to sit. So when it came to your point, you got out the car and you went to school. You knew what time was pickup, and you knew who was going to pick you up. So and we would go about our days because we had different friends, different social groups. So we definitely got to participate with the different things in regards to our friends. And it wasn't like, oh, because this is Rebecca's friend, she must have to do stuff with her sisters too. No, we were able to do things with our friends too, without having to have our siblings tag along or affect our ability to go somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah. I think Hannah was going to say something.
Hannah, what were you going to say?
I kind of forgot what I was going to say now, but I think like with the question that you said of like the different personalities, I feel like all three of my siblings, we all have different personalities. And I feel like as my mom's grown older, she talks with us differently because of our like different personalities. I think that probably stems off of like how, even with like elementary, middle school, she sent us to three different schools. And then as we got into high school, we all went away from home. So I know that's kind of like something that would be kind of abnormal when people think about it. So from our high school to 12th grade years, we were all away from the home. We were not with our mom. We all, I guess you could say, it was like boarding schools, but Rebecca and Tyler both went to boarding schools, but I decided to go back to St. Croix. So, throughout all, my mom really gave us all the option of being able to be like, hey, we want to do this, we want to go there. And it wasn't like, oh, you don't want to stay home with your mom. Some questions I know would always get from my friends, like, you don't miss her and things like that. And part of me would miss her, but then I don't know how, I feel like through like the independence of her allowing us to make choices, I kind of had that kind of independence early where I was like, yeah, I miss my mom, but I know this is where I want to be to like grow as a person, and just see the world a different way. I know like I appreciate that when I look back now, but I know sometimes, I'm like, oh, I guess if I was closer to my mom, some things might have not gone the way that they went. But, well, it's life. And I feel like it made me, grow as the woman I am now.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm going to follow up because the couple of questions that have come in, and I appreciate you all asking the questions. I appreciate you being patient with us as we try to get to it. But there's a question for the girls, so I'll stay with the girls first. And he said, one of the things that I think Rebecca said was that for us, it wasn't an inconvenience when we were being dropped off at different schools because it was just the way our lives were. Did you ever, and think about the fact that it wasn't an inconvenience for y'all, but it was an inconvenience for mom and dad. It was an inconvenience for parents to drop us off in 3 different schools. It was an inconvenience, even it was hard for them to even let us go and be away from their children because they wanted the very best for us. So Kim asked a question, did all the things that you see, did you appreciate it from your mom when you were younger? Or is it something, the appreciation, is it something that has happened now as you have gotten older?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I think that definitely I can speak for myself, like as I've gotten older, I've appreciated it more. And as far as like the inconvenience thing, I personally see it as an inconvenience because I never really heard my parents complain. Like I can't say I've heard them complain about something like, oh, we gotta take this school. Why do you guys have to go to different schools? Like they never made it a thing. They kind of were more so very supportive of, oh, you want to do something, and then it's they do it. And so I think that as I've gotten older, I've been able to kind of reflect, like, wow, because my parents did something this way, this is why I have this, whether good or bad, this is why I operate a certain way. And so in that light, I think definitely within the last, I would say 5 or 6 years, I'm 27, so that I've learned how their parenting definitely has made me who I am. and so I think that they were I'm sure it was a lot on them, but you couldn't really tell. And I think that's just by nature of having, 2 parents in the home and like them I think when they were younger, that's what I will say about them. When they were younger, I don't think they had choices. Like in their home growing up, they didn't. It was just kind of like my mom said, you do as you say. My dad's a pastor's kid, so it was pretty like everything was kind of like set in stone with what you're supposed to be doing and people expecting something. Like my mom, her dad's a physician, so you have to live a certain way. So I think they were just so excited to like not have labels or be a part of any type of like expectation within like the church world or like work world, that they were just like, do whatever you want. We support you.
We'll give you freedom.
Exactly. And so because my mom got so many whoopings growing up, she did not get whoopings. She was like, oh, timeout. Like she is a timeout CEO. Like she will sit and she will ask you, she'll ask a 4-year-old, well, why did you do that? Are you sorry? Let's have a timeout. Let's talk about how this made you feel and why you hit this person. It wasn't, I'm going to beat you. It wasn't that. And so she was so traumatized, I guess, from seeing people getting whooped in the islands because, like she said, how discipline is given is different.
It's different. Right?
She was just so traumatized that she navigated so far to like, I'm gonna talk about sex. That's another thing. My mom taught us about sex probably when we could start talking. That's when she was talking about sex to us, and it's definitely taboo, right? But she realized how, because she didn't know anything about it going into college, it was just like she thought if she held a boy's hand, she would get pregnant. That was the way in which, the narrative. So for us, she was like, this is what happens if you do X, Y, and Z. She worked in St. Croix. She worked with a lot of women who were either domestically abused or single moms or, had different things going on. And she was like, X plus Y equals Z. Okay, just so there's no confusion. If you do this is what's going to happen. And we're in elementary school and learning about this. Seeing condoms and her telling us this is what it's for. And so we're just like, okay, this is what parents talk about with their kids. Not until we're taught, older, we're realizing that's not that's not people.
That's not the norm.
Yeah.
And so I think what stands out, and Kim talked about this a little bit too, is you're assuming as a child the things my parents are doing is normal. That's just what
Yeah.
you grow up and you realize that no, my parents were really special because they did above and beyond.
Right.
But as a child, you really don't see that. And so Kim, when you say what I heard was that the parents never complained, and you think you complain and make your girls feel like they're inconvenienced with you. For I don't know any child that really sits down and tells the parents, and I've said this when I talk to women before. If you have a child who tells you every day you are the best mom, thank you for me. Thank you for making sure that I don't go naked. Thank you for that's the you need to praise God for that child every day. Because children just don't see that. But the hope is that they will grow and they will look back and say, oh my goodness, I did have a roof over my head.
Yeah.
And I had clothes to wear. And I had parents who dropped me in school every day.
Mhm.
But it's hard for them to see it at the moment. And our frustration often comes when we're doing what we know we should be doing, but we're not getting that appreciation. And what I hear from the girls is, no, you really don't get the appreciation at the time, but we will grow up and we will notice. And
Right.
when we notice it, the relationship is going to be cemented because of the difference.
And so I wanted to interject here too, because when Tabitha said she didn't get any spanking, that wasn't true for Rebecca. Because again, as my first child, still operating in what I grew up with. So again, I know that was a reason for our rift and our connection, because it was 4 years between her and my oldest, the next one or so. And Rebecca did get spankings. And I still remember one time giving a spanking to her, and I'm like, why am I doing this? I don't want to do this. But again, it was what people are thinking that you're supposed to do when you have a child who may not be behaving as you wish them to do. And I'm like, this is horrible. This is horrible. And I remember taking parenting classes because I said I needed help to change this. So Rebecca really did get the worst side of my parenting. And that's become our relationship continues to have areas that we still are uncomfortable with because of that history.
It's funny, I used to call Salem my experiment baby because there were a lot of things that I experimented with her that the boys got the benefit of because she taught me that doesn't work. But I think knowing that you're coming into parenting and you don't know, you're experimenting, you're trying to see what works and what doesn't work, which would lead me to my next question. We usually, when we have our first child, we're a lot younger. By the time we have our third, we're a lot older. So how has parenting changed, not just because of the personalities of the children, of your daughters, but how has it changed from stage to stage?
Well,
I could tell you, we see differences.
Tell me what differences you have there.
So, like I said, Hannah and I are about 7 years apart. So that means I was about 7 when she was born, per se. So, given the fact that I put over the time, and given that I am technically a millennial, even though I'm in my 30s, given the time frame that I was born and she was born, so much changed technologically. So it's just to the fact that in my mind, I didn't get a cell phone until I was in high school, whereas Hannah was in elementary school with a cell phone, and that was normal for her. Plus, different activities my mother would let Hannah do as a elementary child. When I was in elementary school, that wasn't the case. per se, and things were a lot different. Just like my mom, like she said, she learned. So if each of us, she improved. So there was different things that it was like I wasn't allowed to do, even at my sister's ages per se, even in high school, that they were able to do. And I'm like, wow, so much has changed over time with technology as she learned. Because I went to boarding school, like my sister said, we all went away to school. I went to boarding school so I could get away from my parents because I didn't want to stay with them, and my parents were nice enough to let me go, and it let me have the freedom to somewhat do things that I wanted to do, whereas my siblings were able to do those things at home. And it's the differences of things over time, and how if I had possibly been able to do those, would I have stayed at home as opposed to going to boarding school, which I felt offered me some freedom. But I'll let Carla explain how she felt it was different.
Yeah, I want to hear about from the other girls too, because what I hear from you is my parents were so much stricter with me as the first child, and they gave the younger ones a little bit more freedom than they did, right? Okay, so how about what did you see, Carla?
I think it's interesting because it's always interesting to hear that, somebody's experience with somebody that you love or care about is so different than yours. Even though my mom is my mom is and so I think that having Hannah come 2 years after me, it did afford me, some privileges that Becca didn't have because I wasn't alone. Like I was never alone. I was never the only child, so I had an older sister. I was a baby for 2 years, and then so of course I'm not getting in trouble a lot because I'm a baby. So I'm sure through Becca's lenses, there was a lot of attention on me. And then when Hannah came, I just kind of followed that attention and just stayed close to Hannah so I could reap the benefits of whatever she did.
The baby.
Yeah, the baby benefits. And so, I mean, I think that, I don't know, it's interesting to hear Becca say that she left the house because she wanted freedom, because I feel like my parents are they're the most free people I know. So for Becca to feel like a prisoner in the same house that I felt so like I could do anything, I just still, even though she says it's so hard for me to say, really? Like, you know you felt like, I don't know.
So that's the reason for these conversations, because when I hear my children talk, it's like, no, that's Elias is my baby's reality. It's so different from Salem's reality, and yet they grew up in the same home. So it's so nice that you're saying that's not the way I saw it. So we still had the same mama, we still had the same daddy, in the same household. Okay. How about you get on here a little bit? Yes, Kim, a whole new world, right?
Yeah, I guess like for me, I feel like how my mom has been talking, like she had figured out how she wanted to parent properly. It was through like the mistakes she made. She was learning how to better be a parent. So I feel by the time it came to me, I feel like I was kind of like, I don't want to say a loner, but I think I kind of like removed myself a lot to like the background. So it's like I never felt like I really got in trouble compared to like my other siblings during when we're growing up, because I kind of was just trying to be the good child, I guess, of like just following along. But I don't know if like during high school when I decided to go back, if it was similar to Rebecca, if I was feeling like I wanted to get away. But I don't think when I'm thinking about why I wanted to go back, it wasn't because of that. I just was so used to that environment in the Caribbean for so long. Moving to the States, again, it was different. But I was different for me because I went from my mom, who was being so free, to I lived with my aunt, who was very strict. And so it was a lot of like tensions there. And my mom is trying to talk with my aunt to parent her, even though I'm not her child, but since she's taking care of me. But I feel like growing up, I did get a lot of freedom. And I could see maybe in Rebecca's perspective how certain things, I got, because they were getting cell phones. My mom just gave us all cell phones. But it was like a Nokia, back in the day, those little bar phones, they got a Razor and a BlackBerry. So I wasn't getting something lavishly, but it was like the Nokia bar phone for me to, put ringtones on. But I do see that I was favored in certain ways that I could see my sisters perceive that. And even now, my mom will cook or do things and they believe my mom is favoring me. It's just because I ask my mom for things and they don't ask her. They don't be direct. But I know they're rolling their eyes because they think I'm the favorite of both my parents. But
you're the baby, so you milk it. My son is 20. Oh, he's 21. He'll be 22 this month. But he was calling. He's in China right now, and he was calling and wanted to talk to the baby brother. And I said, "Oh, he's still sleeping." He's like, "Mom, it's noon." I said, "Yeah, you're letting Elias sleep till noon? What did you do with my mother?" Because that wasn't their reality. Summer, no summer, we got up, but early. And so I think part of it is we grow older, we get tired. Another part of it is that we've learned the things that work and the things that didn't work. And so with our youngest one, we do it just a little bit different.
And one of the things I want to throw out there too is my philosophy in raising children. I know I took it kind of literally, but I always remember how Jesus in the Bible, when he was 12, he got lost, or that's when he went to the temple and he did. And so in my estimation, I felt that all of my parenting and what I needed to teach my children, they had to know by 12. Because after 12 years old, if they don't know it by then to make their decisions, what's the point? And so for me, teaching them the different basic things was important for me. So that's when somebody asked about what I meant as hands off. So after the age of 12, it was about letting them have the consequences to whatever decisions they made. Because many times, one of the things I felt for me is I didn't have an opportunity to fail until I went to college. And that was painful. Instead of allowing my children to let them fail when they're still in my care, but giving them that space to make a mistake, so that the first time you made a mistake wasn't when you're in college, when you don't have an umbrella or a cushion because somebody protected you so much. And I remember parents thinking, well, I don't want this child with such and such because they're going to be a bad influence on my child. I remember thinking, I'm not worried about my children being influenced by anyone. If anything, my children would be the ones who would influence somebody to do something bad because they knew what was right or wrong, and they would make a decision. So by the time they were 12, when I say hands-off parenting, it was just like, right, by now we're just going to reap whatever consequence you're going to make in whatever decision you're going to make. And I am comfortable enough to let you fall, let you fail, because that's part of living, knowing you have to fail.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's how you learn. One of the parenting books that's out there is Have a New Kid by Friday with Kevin Leman. And one of the things he says over and over is let consequences be the teacher. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm hearing you saying. Let the children face the consequences. They're going to learn more from those consequences than the talking that we do and everything else that we do.
Yeah. I think a practical example for people who are kind of like avoided hands off. We didn't have house keys. It wasn't like, okay, you can do what you want. It was like my mom raised us vegetarian. So when we were 12 years old, she said, you're old enough to make the decision whether or not you want to eat meat or continue to be a vegetarian. I've shown you why I do it. And and so, yeah, at 12, I was happy to go to McDonald's and finally get chicken nuggets. I thought I was missing out. And then I wasn't really missing out. But, we only could get fish fillets at McDonald's, But that was one example. And then we were raised Seventh-day Adventists. And so with the Sabbath from sunset Friday to sunset Saturday, we observe the Sabbath. And so we go to church and all that. And so I remember being in middle school and my parents sitting me down and they're like, okay, you're 12, you're old enough. I was on the basketball team. They're like, if you want to play on a basketball game on Friday night, you can. You're old enough to make your own decision. And I said, okay. And I played. They weren't there. So they weren't at the games, but it wasn't like I came home and there was like shame, like, oh, you wouldn't play. Right. No. And then as I continued to grow older, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm missing out. I love the Sabbath. Like I love being able to shut down, And so not forcing it made it more enjoyable for me later on to really appreciate it. And it's
I love that because what I'm hearing is they allowed you not only to make because they allowed you to make the choices, you own your
right.
own decision.
Yes.
So you were not doing these things because your mom made you do it or your dad made you do it. Now you own it because you
Yeah.
decide. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that so you as we get ready to wrap up, but I can't believe it's been 50 minutes already. Okay, this is so good. Thank you to everyone that's joining us. I love this. But if you would have one takeaway, for daughters and mothers, especially those who are in a relationship where they're not the only girl. You would have one takeaway for them based on how you were mothered and what you experienced growing up. What would it be? I think okay. Go ahead. Go ahead, Tony.
So this is like for like daughters in general, if they have other siblings, like what would
Whoever you feel like you would like to speak to. Yeah, either one of them or both.
I think something definitely within the last couple years. Okay, this is what I will say. The way that your parents treat a child affects how the siblings interact. And so with that, parents have to be very cognizant of that. And so growing up, me and Rebecca had a very strained relationship. We weren't really close. And it wasn't, my parents would remind me like, okay, it's not your fault, Becca, and you guys don't have a relationship. It's us. They would take ownership. Like, we did this, don't be so hard on don't think it's you. We did this. We created this, right? And so you think about Joseph. I'm not the Joseph, but in the sense Joseph, the brothers, all of that, right? So one thing that I think I've been able to appreciate for the daughters or just siblings in general is really being able to accept that you and your siblings have very, very different experiences. And each one is very valid. Each one is very real. And don't try to convince them that their story or experience should be your story or experience. Hear it, feel it, allow them to share it, and not think that it's taboo for them to have felt that way for something that you don't feel that way. So I think that's something for the daughters or siblings to kind of hold on, because it is kind of hard to remember that, yeah, we grew up in the same household, but we had different experiences.
But yes, I love that because your reality is different. It's kind of like I had Salem when I was 26.
Yeah.
I had it when I was 38.
Yeah.
10 years apart. And the way I mothered at 26 was so different. I have lived 10 years worth of life. I have done so much in those 10 years.
Yeah.
And the way I mothered him at 36 was very different then. And by the time I'm 56, Elias is barely about 20 years old, so let me 30. All of that is different.
Yeah.
I think it's very huge. Okay, great. Who wants to go next? What's your one thing you would say either to mothers or daughters or both?
I would say, I guess, as daughters or mothers, I guess just having, similar to, I guess, what Tab was saying, but having a safe space to be able to share your problems or your wrongdoings. And I feel like my mom created that, where I told her some things that I did wrong, and she wasn't like first to reprimand. She was just there to listen and to hear what I did and how I felt, and then still love on me. And still, then when she asked if I wanted advice or wanted her to share something, then I could hear it, receive it after hearing, my own like kind of personal turmoil or like different things that I was kind of dealing with mentally or just that were going on with my life. And so I think that I really love that now, as I'm not afraid to tell my mom something horrible that I feel like I know some of my friends might not have that space to be able to share. And I think it's important to kind of have that space of like that moment where, siblings or daughters and mothers can be able to, have that space to share, and it to be an honest space, and it's just to listen And then if I want some feedback or some response, then they can, but to just be able to get it out there and to feel heard, I feel like it's very important. And I feel like it definitely benefited me and helped me to grow continually.
I like that. I think one of the things your mom and I had talked about a while back before we even talked about what she did was how important it was for her to create honesty in her interactions and make you guys know be completely honest with me, and and so I love that you say that because I think the relationship I have with my son is different. The relationship I have with my daughter, where we can walk into the bathroom when both of us are using the bathroom and talk. But I think when you're having more than one daughter, you have to be intentional. Otherwise, you won't be able to have that safe space. And what I have is that safe space is extremely important, not just the safe space for us three to talk to mom, but the safe space for each of us individually to feel like we're seen and heard. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
I guess like feeding off of what my sister said, I think a big part for mother-daughter relationships is communication. So you want to make sure, like she said, you want to have a safe space to have that, but you want to also feel like you can communicate, because a lot of things you can address if you feel open and willing to address them and talk about them, and having the words to address how you feel or different things going on in your life. So that way you can work towards forming that relationship. And just as my mom said with the hands-off parenting, allowing us to fail gave us the opportunities to learn from it, whether we talked about it with them or without talking to them about it. So you want to make sure you can learn what your languages are as well, along with, this is how my mom, just like I know my mom's not touchy-feely, learning what ways that you guys can address and cope and communicate and have bonding so you can spend time with each other in a way that is mutually beneficial instead of you both being uncomfortable. So just learning how you can be mutually beneficial in your relationship as mothers and daughters.
I love that. I think that's huge. One of my basic principles is keep talking. Just keep talking. As long as we keep communicating, we're going to find our way back to each other. And I think so many times, like what Tabitha had said earlier about this, it would be so easy to stay in that hurt state and not have language to be able to say, Mama, this is how this makes me feel. And knowing that if you're saying I'm sorry is not going to help, I just want you to hear me, because eventually repeat themselves so that next time, but sometimes because there's so much hurt, there was a word I think Salem used last week. We talked about our relationship being tumultuous but not toxic.
Yeah.
I think so many times we don't pass through the tumult in our relationship, it becomes toxic.
Yeah.
If you keep talking and keep the communication lines open and be respectful and say, okay, I don't want to talk right now, and we respect that, to know that we can always come back and build language. And I think this is important, especially for moms of younger kids, because younger kids don't have the language. When they're upset about something, they may not know the words to use to tell them to this really hurt my feelings. My job as a mom of a young child is to provide that language. So by asking the questions and by letting them know it's safe to speak. And as long as we have that, then what you're saying is we will always have a good relationship.
Yeah.
So last but not, hey, look at you can see you. Last but not least, Carla, what would be your advice?
Okay, my takeaway, and I want to say to parents, to mothers, acknowledge when you've hurt your children, when you've hurt your daughter. Be willing to have that conversation. One of the things that you mentioned with Udawaki said last week, and you said your daughter was the first one to get therapy. We started talking about that recently, my daughter and I, Rebecca, about that we may have to do something together or as an individual to continue to build on our relationship. So as a mom, be willing to acknowledge if you've hurt your child and not try to put the blame on them, and be okay if they still need some space to heal from what you have done. And so, because it is possible to restore relationships, but you do need to take ownership for what has occurred in the relationship, be it if you put unrealistic expectations onto your child, be it if you have given them some sense of failure because of something, or some sense of shame or guilt because they didn't do certain things your way. Because that is a way that I saw how I was manipulated as a child, and others, that they will guilt you into doing something. And I had to make a choice not to do that to my girls and guilt them into something, because like, oh, mommy's such and such. So my takeaway and encouragement for parents, if you have a fractured relationship with your child, reflect back on them, let them vent and talk about it. A couple years ago, my siblings, we all sat down with my mom and talked about the pain that we had as children. And not that we wanted to hurt her, but just so she could hear it, so we can clear the air as we move forward as adults. We forgive, but we just needed to be heard. And that's what I wanted to create, that safe space for the girls. So I told them years ago, no matter what you tell me, you can be honest with me. Whatever you could tell me, and your mom is going to be okay with that. Don't let somebody else tell me that, because I realized that I couldn't share certain things with my mom or other things because it would be associated with disappointment or shame or something else. But I wanted my girls to know, every child should feel they have a safe person that they can say whatever thoughts they're feeling, whatever behavior they did. They should be able to feel they can come to you and know that you're not going to condemn them. And so that's just my opinion.
I like that. I think that really,
Rebecca.
we lost I think we're coming to an end. I hope you'll get back on.
Okay.
But I had put up an Nigerian saying that says something about that. There you go. Hey, Rebecca.
Hey. Sorry.
It's a Nigerian saying, because I know that some of those who are watching this are from my culture, but it says, if you need it. And it's something my mom used to say all the time, which means, loosely translated, that whenever you have two vessels that are close to each other, they're going to rub against each other. And my mom would say that basically to normalize the hurt that you feel in relationships. You're together, you're two vessels, you're close together, you're going to rub against each other. But what do you do when you rub against each other? You acknowledge the hurt. That's what I used to say. Acknowledge the hurt. And then I think one of the things that I try to blame it on being an African parent. My children don't agree. I'm an African mother. But I want to say it's really hard culturally for us to say to our children, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I hurt you. We try to justify the hurt. Try to say, you know what, I didn't mean to, big picture apologize. One, my youngest son tells me something and I say, Elias, I am so sorry. My mom is not okay. And I said, I know, it's not okay that I hurt your feelings. I just want you to know that I feel really bad for you. So give them the space that they need to heal. Because, I told Kalen, I said something last week, which is, no matter what, I will always be your mother. And the best part, you always be my daughter. Growing up with being adult daughters, you have a say in what this relationship is like. That's what I'm excited about. So what you ladies have said today is that it's not that you and your mom had the best relationship. She was the most awesome mom in the whole world. What you're saying is what my children tell me, which is me humble, which is, hey, we're learning this mothering thing, just like we're learning how to be mothered by you. But we do want it to hurt. We're committed to it. And we're going to work through the pain, we're going to work through the hurt, and maintain the relationship.
Yes.
So I am so grateful that y'all have spent the past 1 hour with me. Now I know I can go to Boston, I can go to Atlanta or Florida, and know that I have people. Okay. So, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation, mothers and daughters. And we will be back here next week, 2:30, with another group of guests, because I believe it's important to have this conversation.
Yes.
So, happy 4th, everyone. Thank you for making this happen.
All right. You're welcome. Thanks, Udwa.
Bye.